Hi, it's Dave. Welcome. Today I'm joined by Jordan O'Connor. He is the founder of Closet Tools, which is a web app that helps sellers on Poshmark sell more and save time. I want to welcome you to the channel, Jordan.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk with you. I've been following you on Twitter for quite a while, and I feel like you have some great insights on business, on entrepreneurship, moving from being an employee to starting your own business, creating more revenue, marketing, reaching out. And what I'm particularly interested in is kind of the first principle, so the essence of business, starting a business and gaining some tips myself, but also sharing with my audience as well. Your story actually reminds me a lot of my own story of starting a business back in 2008 on the App Store, kind of hustling and finding a niche, finding an opportunity, growing that business. And I still actually run that business on the side. But with your Closet Tools, I know that you're still the solo person, right? Working on this, is that correct?
Yep, that's right.
Okay, great. And then how long have you been working on Closet Tools for?
I've been working on it for actually about 3 years now, was when I started. Yeah.
All right. And I've seen over the years, your monthly revenue has gone up over the years. What is it at now currently?
So right now it's doing about 40K a month. And it grew a lot this previous summer. It went from about 15K to about 30K
Wow.
MRR in a couple months. And then from there it's just kind of slowly grown a little bit. So yeah, it's had moments of growing a lot faster. And I think right now it's at the point where, it's growing, I don't know, 500,000 MRR a month kind of thing. And it's mostly because I haven't done a lot with it lately,
Mm,
as far as like growing it and adding new features and really engaging with my audience and stuff like that. Yeah, right now I'm right about to kick back into high gear and start to get it moving again.
cool. So at 40,000 monthly run rate or monthly income revenue, what percent or what do your expenses look like?
So expenses, there's not very many. The majority is advertising. I do Google search advertising, and I spend I don't know, about 2,500, 3,000 a month on that. That brings in about 1,000 clicks a month. But the primary marketing driver is SEO, which brings in anywhere from 7,000 to 10,000 clicks a month, and it's pretty highly targeted. So the it's not a super impressive amount of traffic, but it does drive about 15 or 20 free trials a day, and that steady pipeline of new customers is what keeps it growing.
Okay, sounds good. So, what take home after your expenses, what 30 to 35 a month, do you think?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, web hosting, you're talking tens, maybe $100 a month
Hmm.
total. I think the most expensive thing is probably like Help Scout that I pay for, like things like that, but it's in the order of like 200-300 bucks a
Hmm.
month. Nothing,
Yeah.
nothing crazy. Yeah.
Awesome. So I want to get into kind of move into eventually kind of lessons in entrepreneurship, lessons in business, some key gems or key insights that you've had along the way to really find some success with entrepreneurship. But first, I want to hear more about your story. And first, I also want to get some context on Closet Tools. So, can you share a bit more on Closet Tools, what your product is, also what Poshmark is, and how it helps people on Poshmark?
Yeah, sure. So Closet Tools itself is a an automation tool. I call it engagement automation. You can think of it, kind of like an Instagram bot or a Twitter bot, something that automates social media interactions, and it does that because Poshmark is built more like a social media platform, and Poshmark is a retail arbitrage platform where basically the majority of users are buying used clothes from a cheaper source, and then they're flipping it for a higher profit online. And so it's actually a pretty huge market, and a lot of those sellers will sell on eBay, and there's some other platforms out there, Facebook Marketplace, things like that. But what's unique about Poshmark is it is more of a social media platform where you have a closet, which would be like your profile on Instagram per se, and users can like items, they can comment on them, you can share them with other people. And Poshmark also has live events like parties that sellers are sharing to the party live while shoppers are in the party just checking out what's coming in and potentially buying items and things like that. And so Poshmark does this because they want to have high engagement on the platform to be able to retain users and keep them in the platform and keep them buying things and keep them selling things. And so it's great because it does actually help sellers make sales because it does keep buyers engaged. But sellers also end up spending a lot of time engaging with the platform, sharing with people, and commenting, liking, and all that stuff to try to generate more sales. And so that's what Closet Tools works to automate. And it doesn't automate everything for them, but it at least saves them a couple hours a day, probably on average. And that in and of itself is the core tool. It is saving them time. And then in the end, it does end up helping them make more sales because they're able to spend their time a little differently, and they can spend it on other things that help drive sales too.
Specifically, like, what does Closet Tools do? Does it, for example, respond to people's messages? Does it, handle some of the tedious kind of backend or tasks?
Yeah.
Like, managing your followers? Like, what does it do?
The one main thing that it started as, like the first thing that it did, is what's called sharing to followers. So what happens with Poshmark, like if you loaded Poshmark up on your phone, there's a main feed, and it's kind of like an Instagram feed, or like a Twitter feed. It's just like the main feed. But the way Poshmark is set up, you have to share your items to that feed if you want your followers to see your items in their feed. Otherwise, they'd have to visit your closet and search through your closet to see items. And so basically, if you want your followers to see your items throughout the day, you need to be sharing to that feed consistently throughout the day. And that's a manual process that can only be done one at a time. And so a lot of sellers will have 1,000, 2,000 items in their closet. And it takes anywhere from 2 to 4 seconds to share each item. It takes 45 minutes, an hour to share your whole closet, and you're just sitting there clicking buttons for an hour just to share your items to that feed. And the best way to make sales other than search, so like if somebody like searches, I want Nike shoes, like obviously then you want your items to show up there. That's about 60% of sales is what Poshmark reports. The rest of sales, 40%, are driven by the main feed and parties where you're engaging with the platform and trying to get your items in front of users. And so that, like I said, from day one, that's the primary automation that it did, was sharing your items to the feed consistently. And what's nice about it is you can share them. I call it like a slow drip throughout the day. So just consistently sharing to that feed. So you're always in the feed, you're always top of mind for your followers. And not only does it share your items to your followers, but it also helps you get more followers so that you can build your audience, and then you're getting in front of more people. And so it's kind of a growth engine in that way. So it saves you time and grows your closet at the same time.
So hypothetically, let's say I have 500, clothing items and stuff to sell on Poshmark, and I go into Closet Tools, your app, then it'll basically let me push all those items one at a time, dripping them out throughout the day to all of my followers. So do people on Poshmark, if I have 500 items, am I posting that once every day, like all the items, or is it spaced out once per week, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, you would list the item once, and then what the goal is to have your item listed, and then you're sharing it with your audience. And then over time, you want to get likes on your items, because likes are somewhat of an indication that that person would like to buy that thing. And then Poshmark has a couple slight automations around liking. So one of the things is called offer to likers, where as soon as somebody likes an item, you can offer it to them at a discount of 10, 20, 30%, or you can give them free shipping. So it's not automatic where like as soon as they like it, it sends an offer out. You have to go in and say, offer this item to that person. And so that's another thing that Closet Tools does, is it can run through your entire closet and offer 10% discount on every item to anybody that's liked the items. And what's powerful with that too is it sends a notification and an email to the liker. So it's a pretty high engagement action, and that really helps drive sales on the platform. So yeah, there's a few things like that that require you sitting there and spending time doing that. Whereas with Closet Tools, you're able to just hit one button and it runs it for you and just does it automatically throughout the day.
That's interesting. So for the email, is that sent? I'm guessing that's sent through Poshmark, right? Poshmark sends that.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. It's like a notification email.
Got it.
Yeah. Just like
So
social media.
if a seller was to offer a 10% discount to a person that say just liked their item, would it automatically in the app, if they did it manually, send a notification and an email as well?
Yeah, so it has to be the kind of restriction is it has to be 10% less than any previous offers or like the original asking price. So if you just had it listed and somebody just liked it, then if you did 10% off, then it would send them a notification and an email. Whereas you technically can send them another notification if you do another 10% off. So if you send 20% off, it would send them another notification and an email. And then the way that Poshmark works, it's sometimes you can get kind of a buy it now, kind of like eBay style, but it is more of a bargaining platform where typically buyers will offer something slightly less than what you're asking, and then you kind of meet in the middle usually, and so that's how you generate sales.
How is that negotiation? How does that take place? Does the person just say, "Hey, I offer $5 on this $10 thing you're asking for"?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, it's probably more like a $50 item and, they'd offer $35 or something like that. And it's kind of like a in-app messaging kind of thing. So it's almost like you're chatting with the person.
Does Closet Tools
so
help? Does Closet Tools help with that type of dialogue or messaging as well?
No, it doesn't. And so like that's part of, something that the user would like to have more free time to do. And so like Poshmark automates a lot of the other things that aren't directly related to sales. Like it's not like they're like hard selling, but it's all these things that can grow your closet and build your ecosystem so that you can be, on the phone with customers and making sales.
If Poshmark ever comes up with an automated kind of posting feature where you could automatically post 1,000 items, drip it out, how would that affect your product?
Yeah, I mean that would that would eliminate my product. But the thing is, for Poshmark, they want that high user engagement. They want people on the platform. They want them engaging, and so that's kind of a core tenet of the platform. So if they were to automate that, then all of a sudden they're basically introducing almost like a spam ecosystem where people are just barraging the main feed. And so it's interesting. There's some limitations in place. If somebody uses Closet Tools, you can't sell or you can't share more than 10,000 items in a day. Otherwise, your closet will actually be put on pause. You can't share anymore. Also, about every 1,000 shares or so, a Google CAPTCHA comes up and you have to solve it to be able to continue sharing. So they have these limitations in place that keep people from using automation because they do want it to be real engagement with the platform. So that's a pretty baked in psychology on the platform. And so I couldn't ever see them actually doing that.
So it's different ethos, different values that Poshmark is trying to get to. And you're aligning yourself with the bigger kind of fish, people who are wanting to sell a lot on Poshmark, who don't want to go through the hassle of individually posting and offering, etc. Fun stuff. Poshmark, I mean, recently it went IPO under POSH. How is this company doing? Is it growing, and what is its unique kind of competitive advantage?
Yeah, it definitely is growing. I haven't paid attention too close. They used to report more publicly how they were growing and things like that. But it was back in 2018. They had something like 40 million active sellers on the platform. So that's not even just buyers. So it's a pretty huge platform. And I think the unique thing is it's so centered around clothing primarily. So there's a lot less options to pick from, and it's a lot more specific than something like an eBay or something like that. The other thing is there's some features of the platform that guarantee authenticity of items. And there tends to be a good reputation for sellers on the platform, so like you're not, there's a risk when you buy something that's used where, they could have doctored up the images or whatever and made it look better than it actually was. And so Poshmark has built somewhat of a trust with the reseller community and the buyers in the platform to be a high trust platform where you're getting what you're paying for. And then even for the more higher up things, I think it's like a $500 kind of cap. Anything above $500, the package will actually go to Poshmark first. They'll verify authentication, say it's like a high-end, purse, a Louis Vuitton purse. Poshmark will actually verify that it's a real purse, and then they'll send it out to the buyer. So they have things like that kind of build trust, and that's what makes it a good platform to buy and sell on.
Mm-hmm. I mean, are sellers doing multiple platforms at the same time with the same item? Like, for example, let's say I have a purse. Do I sell it on Poshmark? Do I sell it on eBay, on Facebook Marketplace, etc.?
Yeah. So that's actually an interesting problem that other somewhat indie makers are solving too. They're called relisting applications, and yeah, you're right. They'll try to list the same item on eBay, on Facebook Marketplace. There's some other apps called like Mercari, and I think ThreadUp is another one. There's a few other platforms, yeah, and they will try to list them on there. And obviously the issue with that is if somebody buys it on one platform, then you'd have to delist it on the other ones. And so that's what some of the other automation apps can do. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I want to get back into some of the closet tools and the competition, your future plans a little bit later on. But moving into kind of your background, where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I grew up here. I'm based out of Rochester, New York, and I've lived within an hour of here my entire life. So yeah, I went to a pretty rural high school, really small town, probably, 20, 30 in a class. So it was really small. And then kind of towards high school, I realized that I was really interested in technology. I wanted to, work with electronics and things like that. So I actually went to a school called RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, which is a private school. It's a pretty good tech school. And I went for electrical engineering. And when I went for electrical engineering, I kind of was naive. I didn't really know what that meant or anything like that. And it kind of turned out to be a program that was more around like microprocessor design and very focused on low level hardware, which is pretty cool. Like it actually was really neat. But I actually didn't even know much of anything about code. I didn't even think of coding before I went to RIT. And when I got there, I was actually exposed to coding. So, like some of my friends that I made there were developers. They were computer science majors and stuff like that. And so that's where I was actually exposed to code. And then once I've figured out that coding was awesome and I could do anything with it, I pretty much switched all of my electives to more of a computer engineering degree, they would call it. So like, you kind of a hybrid of hardware and software. And that was pretty cool. And so I graduated and I worked for a company named Corning, which Corning you might know for like Gorilla Glass. But they do a lot of other glass products. And the department I was in was the lithography department, which is lithography is a lens stack that a company like Intel would use to image their processors. So it actually takes a masked image of, the silicon wafer and it images it down to the microscopic 7 nanometer image that they put on the silicon mask. And so Corning would build the lens stack that would go in between the mask and the silicon. And so I did that in total for 7 years. And during that time, so I got married and we had a kid. And RIT was really expensive, so I had a lot of student loans, and just debt and other expenses were taking up a lot of my income, and I didn't have a lot of extra income. And so, the job I had was great. I mean, a lot of people would kill to have my job. It was very flexible. It was some awesome people, some of the smartest people I've ever worked with, but there was no opportunities to increase pay really. And there was no real ladder to climb unless you wanted to go on the management track. And I was much more interested in the technology side. So it was kind of this, just a bunch of little things that added up to like, okay, I need to actually do something on my own and kind of take control of my own future if I actually want to, get rid of this debt in a reasonable amount of time and, take control over some of my finances. So that's kind of what led to that.
Hmm. How much debt did you have coming out of college?
I had about 125K. And then my wife also brought about 25K in student loans as well. And so, 150K. And then I started out around 70K a year at Corning. So, it was about half of my income was going to basically minimum payments, you're talking 30-year loan.
How much was your minimum payment for your debt?
It was probably about 1,500.
Okay, got it. And then,
Yep. Yep.
so you're
So,
making about
yeah.
70, so 6,000 a month. How much was your take home?
It was about like 4K a month.
Okay, so and then you're spending about
Yep.
1,500 out of your 4,000 to make your minimum payment.
Yeah.
So what was going through your head at this time? Like, did it bother you? Were you motivated to try to, get out of debt? Yeah, what were you thinking?
Yeah. It did really bother me. I think it was after I had my son that I really realized like I want to have a better future for him. I want to do things differently. And so I think that was really the kicker of, when I started learning some new skills outside of Corning and trying to build some things on my own. Um, yeah, I think the debt to me was it just makes you anxious. It makes, gives you some anxiety, and it's just kind of always in the background and you're always making these payments, but you're also not making any traction, you know. And I didn't want to be in that scenario for the next 30 years of my life. I wanted to eliminate it as fast as I possibly could and then and then move on with life. So that the original goal for Closet Tools was to make something that made, an extra 1,000, $2,000 a month, something to just start paying that debt faster. I want to pay it off in 10 years instead of 30 years. That was the original goal. It never was actually built yeah, honestly, it wasn't built even to start a business, but we can get into that.
Mhm.
But when it turned into a business, the intention was to keep it small and to just have something that, that helped out with the bills. So,
Um, when you're at RIT, working, studying electrical engineering, you're seeing some friends doing computer science, you're getting into coding a bit. Were you tempted at all to just go for, a software engineering programming job out of college?
um, by the time I was really exposed to it, I was already halfway through my major. Um, and it was, it, I do enjoy the hardware. I actually really enjoy the hardware a lot. And I think that's actually a unique skill that I brought even, to Corning and things like that, was having the hardware and software background. There's a lot of people that are just hardware or just software. But having the hybrid, I was a really unique engineer there. And it gave me a lot of autonomy and flexibility because I was pretty much the only person that could do what I did. But it was interesting, just when I when I say exposed to coding, it was funny. I had a friend who now works at SpaceX, and he was just a phenomenal developer. And I had never even really seen code before. And I would literally sit in his dorm room and I would just watch him code because I think he was writing in Python at the time. And he was just, he would get a problem to solve with his homework and he would write some automation to solve the problem. And it was just like magic to me. And so from then on out, it was just the coolest thing. And I just wanted to do everything with code.
That's cool. Were you watching just him typing, or were you actually looking, like watching the code and trying to understand
Yeah, I was
the
just like
code?
sitting in the room with him, like watching him, and he would just kind of talk to me and be like, "Yeah, this is what I'm doing, and this is how you
Hmm.
do this,"
Hmm.
and it wasn't like a long time. It was maybe a couple times I did that, and I was
Yeah.
just, and then after that, I was like, I want to do this. So then I started learning it on my own and stuff. So
Hmm. So you're working at Corning, you've got a decent job, you've got some stress with student loans, making payments. Um, so when was the point where you're like, man, I need to build some skills or get some extra income? When did that happen and what happened?
yeah, yeah. So the building skills thing was interesting. I don't know why I had this perspective, but the thing that I did was I knew that obviously I wanted to do something with code. I wanted to make some sort of app. I wanted to make something tech based. And what was interesting about code was it's something that doesn't require any capital up front to make. Obviously you have to spend the time to build the skill and build the platforms and stuff like that. But I didn't have to invest money in it like a physical product or something like that. But as far as learning skills, it was interesting. I spent probably 2 or 3 years learning. First, I learned web development, so just HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then I went from there to making websites for people. And I kind of went through this process where I would kind of think to myself, oh, if I just wanted to make extra money, I could, do a web design agency and I could just make websites for people. And so I would kind of get into that and I would start making websites for people. And it just didn't sit right with me because at the end of the day, they always just wanted me to build something different than what I wanted to build. And I kind of went through this process a few times. I started then, I was actually, after I had kind of learned web code, I was on Hacker News and I saw some thread and one of the people were like, yeah, the code is the easy part. The hard part's marketing and distribution. And so I was like, oh, great. I got to learn, marketing distribution if I want to, start a real business. And so then I got into SEO and I found out that that was pretty useful for, marketing businesses. And so I was like, oh, I'll start an SEO agency and, I'll help businesses in my local area do SEO. And I started doing that. And for that one, it was like I realized the value of it. There were some businesses that I was helping bring in tens of thousands of dollars of revenue a month through SEO, and I was getting paid next to nothing for it because I was just a newbie. I didn't have any experience or anything. And so I kind of learned a lot of these different skills, design, and even like back end for applications. There was a trucking app that I made for a friend for free that I used to learn back end skills. So I kind of acquired all of these skills for free in exchange of free work for other people. And at the end of that 2 or 3 years, I kind of realized I have all these skills. I can actually just put all these together and make something for myself. And it was kind of interesting because during that time, I was just mostly interested in helping people. That's kind of what I was doing. I was like, I know how to code. I can help you. I learned some of these things. Let me help you out. And so the Poshmark thing came around when my wife actually started selling on the platform. Some of her friends sold on there and they had some success. And of course, in the back of our minds, we're looking to make extra incomes. So she's like, hey, I can make like an extra $1,000 a month or something just selling clothes on Poshmark. And of course, right away, she starts running into these these time sinks where she's sharing items to the platform all day and she's spending all of her time on it. And I was like, hey, I know how I have an idea for how I can automate that for you. And so I actually made it for her. And it was great. It actually helped out. And then I gave it to her friends too, and it helped them make more sales. And it was really cool. And I had never even thought about selling it as a business or anything like that. But what I did was, because I was into, SEO and blogging and content marketing, I did write about it on my personal blog. And maybe about 2 or 3 months in, I started getting emails from people saying like, hey, like, how do you use this? At the time, it was just a bookmarklet. So like, it was actually just JavaScript that you drag up to your bookmark bar and you would click it and it would just like automatically do some stuff. And I started getting emails from people saying like, hey, like, how do I add this to my closet? How do I, start using this? And, even at that time, I still didn't have like in the back of my mind, like, oh, you should sell this thing. It was like, oh yeah, I can just help you out. Like, this is cool. People are interested in it. And then it did get to a point financially where I really got to the point where I needed to either have like a second job or I needed to get some income. And it was at that point where I was like, oh, I should probably sell this thing.
Awesome. Interesting. So, I mean, it seems like when I hear your story, a lot of it was this whole desire or this idea to help people, right, with practical problems, solving them, helping them. It gave you kind of the context and the motivation or kind of this practical implementation so you could actually learn some new skills, but do so in a way it's not just theoretical. You're actually solving a real person's problem. How important do you think that was in terms of learning new skills to have this really practical, focused, person and problem, to focus all your skills on what you're doing?
Yeah, I think it was super valuable. There's something that a lot of developers run into where they get caught in tutorial hell, where they just kind of are learning things, but they're not actually building anything useful for people. I think one of the most useful things that I built was the trucking application for my friend. So he ran a trucking business, and what he wanted to do was be able to have a dashboard where his drivers could upload documents that prove that they dropped off a load or picked up a load and things like that. Kind of a central application. And that was when I learned a lot of the back end skills of like uploading files and doing event based automations in the back end and things like that. So having real problems to solve really helped build skills that were valuable to other people. I think it's something that a lot of people run into, like I said, especially when they're just doing tutorials and things. They think that the thing they're building is helpful to other people when they don't really know the important problems that they're trying to solve. So I think when you're learning new skills, if you can kind of get outside of the tech bubble and try to solve problems for people that aren't tech people, then you can start to get in some interesting problems where you have to think a little bit differently and you have to make things simple for people that don't understand what's going on. And I think a lot of those things really played well into making a tool that's simple, performant, easy to use, and something that's powerful. You hit one button and it does everything you want it to do and expect it to do.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of nuance and little things in there that I think if you're not actively solving real problems for real people, then you're not really going to figure out those things.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like a lot of times when developers or people trying to learn code or just web stuff or even building a business, they get into this whole thing where the problem isn't necessarily like solving someone's problem. It's learning some technical, code or some understanding. That's the problem. But then there's a disconnect because in order to have value to create a business, you need to be solving not your own technical problem. You need to be solving someone else's problem, which is very practical. It's like, hey, if I could solve this problem, I could 30% increase my sales by 30%, if you guys solve this problem. And there's this very, there's a profound, I think, thing that happens when you're working on something that's so practical, so important to somebody's bottom line. It changes the whole equation where the problem really isn't your own coding. The problem is, how do you solve this problem for this person? And the code is just a way to get there. There's different avenues, but the focus. And so it's curious, it's fascinating to hear that helpful type of helping people's problems kind of centered you, it seems like, into this. The priority is this person's, problems, and it's super practical. It's not theoretical. It's not just, doing just courses or videos and just learning on your own. And another interesting thing is you offered it for free sometimes, right? For a lot of times, like what was that process like? I mean, I know you might have been tempted to charge, but did you offer it for free for a lot of your friends or people you knew? And how did you find these people?
Yeah, any of my friends, I offered it for free because, like I said, at the beginning, it wasn't really intended to be a business. It was just something that was cool and helpful. And, it was, maybe 40 lines of code. It was something very, very simple that I gave away for free to people. So kind of the process of when I turned it into a business, what I did was I had the free script, and what I did was I put it behind an email sign up, and I posted to the Poshmark subreddit. And I said, hey, I have this thing. It's free. You just put in your email and it'll teach you how to install it and use it. And if you think it's cool, give me some feedback for some other things you wanted to do and what would help you sell more items on Poshmark. And so I did that, and I got around 200 signups in a day or two. And from there, I started learning. I built a front end interface around it. I integrated, payments and authentication and all of this stuff. And over the course of that month, I got feedback from people and like, what are some core features that you would want to add? And then in about a month and a half, I've then flipped it on them for the $30 a month, that it even still is priced at now. And right away it had 10 signups, for paying customers. And then it's just kind of slowly grown from there. So yeah.
Yeah. With your pre-closet tools kind of, helping people, were like, how much in the very beginning, I'm guessing most of it was just free stuff, right? You're just helping just to learn the skills. Was that your perspective?
Yeah, I never felt confident enough to actually sell my skills. And I would even say now, being mostly self-taught, I don't feel confident. I wouldn't even feel confident getting a web developer role at a company, like even though, yeah, technically I have probably the skills that I would need to do pretty well. Because you're self-taught, I think there is that a little bit of, like the imposter syndrome, right? You don't feel like you have the credentials to actually charge for something. So that was kind of in the back of my mind too. Like I knew what I was doing was valuable and like people would pay for this. But I never felt confident enough to charge. The other thing was by doing things for free, there's a lot less pressure to do it right necessarily. I mean, like you want to help people, you want to do it right, you want to do it, correctly, but there's less pressure to, I don't know, do it exactly the way the client wants to do it. You can kind of experiment and learn new things and practice your skills on a free basis, because like you get what you pay for, So that I think that flexibility of doing things for free helps you learn things that you wouldn't normally have learned, but also allows you to explore what you want to explore and what you like and what you don't like. Otherwise, if you're billing people, then you're forced to do what the client wants, and you're forced to go down those avenues. And so I think that for, like I said, looking back, I don't know why I had that perspective, yeah. But I did. And I think it played out really well.
Yeah. So you have your first kid, you have a lot of debt payments, stress, you're working full time at Corning. How are you finding time to actually work on these extra projects to build the skills? And it seems like you have a second life. Like, where do you find this time during that time?
Yeah. So that's an interesting one. It was actually right before my son was born. For some reason, I don't know if I heard like horror stories from other parents or something, but they were basically saying like, you're not going to get any sleep. So I started actually training myself to get less sleep. About 6 months before my son was born, I started getting, 7 hours, then 6 hours, and then 5 hours of sleep a night. Just trying to practice for like, okay, I don't want to be super strung out when my son is born. And, kind of during that time, that's when I actually freed up a lot of, time to learn new skills. And instead of doing it on the end of the day, staying up late and working, I would actually get up early. I was getting up at an extreme, I was getting up around 4 a.m. and working for 3 hours, 4 hours before I went to my day job. But on average, I would say it was like 5:30. I was getting up and working for an hour or two every day, taking a course, learning new skills, doing work for free for other people. And I think, during that time, I didn't really know that this was kind of the way to make really good progress, but I kind of just knew that like if I just pick away at this every day and just kind of continually make progress, then that's going to work out really well for me. And the other thing I really, I'm kind of a family guy. I love my kids and I love my wife, and I didn't want to spend time away from them. And so like I didn't want to be working, after dinner, oh, dad's going to go work and, you kids, fend for yourselves kind of thing. I really wanted to spend my time with them. So, really the only time that I could work and not be with them was when they're sleeping. And so that's either late at night or early in the morning. And the advantage of doing things early in the morning is you're really fresh. As long as you got a good night's rest, you're fresh and it's your best work that you can do. And I think that really played well into making sure my best work was going into growing my new skills rather than putting my best work in at Corning and then coming home at the end of the day and giving my leftover energy for the side project. And I think that's really what helped push it in a direction where it became valuable enough to then, build something real.
I mean, just an hour or two in the morning doesn't sound enough to do what you're doing. I mean, are you doing stuff during the day at all? Like taking breaks from your job and et cetera?
Once I started Closet Tools, I was doing some things like that. I was working during lunchtime and things like that. But when you really get down to it and you eliminate all distractions and you have a really clear plan of what you're doing. I mean, I think 1 hour is a bit short, but 2 hours, I mean, you can get a lot done in 2 hours. And especially with code and automation and focusing on automating repeated tasks and things like that. I have a really big emphasis on, not doing things more than I need to. So I think I have a really efficient, it's actually a really lazy approach. I'm just super lazy. but I think that if you're really focused, and this is actually one of my favorite books is called Deep Work by Cal Newport, and that the ethos of that is basically, you're going to get your best work done, when you're focused. There's no distractions, and you're able to get in the zone, get in a flow state, and actually crank out whatever you're doing, at least for knowledge work. And so, that I think it was just that deliberate focused time of, this is what I'm doing in the morning, first thing in the morning, every morning when I wake up, and having that plan really in a short amount of time every day, you can move things forward.
So when you brought down your sleep to, let's say, 5 hours or so before your son was born, did you just keep that 5 hours kind of per night for many years? Or are you still sleeping 5 hours per night, or what's going on?
No, no, not at all. It lasted. It lasted. So it was right around like a month before. So it was like I said, I kind of progressively lowered it, and I'm actually really glad I did that, because our first child, we had no idea what we were doing, but he was a terrible sleeper. He was just up all night. So I actually was like, I was kind of a walking zombie, but I was at least functional. Like, it wasn't healthy at all, but I at least kind of got used to being very tired all the time, and that, I think that kind of helped ease that process in. Um, but yeah, certainly not now, and now, obviously, like, I don't have a day job and stuff like that. So, I do still like to work on Closet Tools early in the morning. I usually work around like 6 a.m. to noon is kind of my work day. And that allows me to spend a lot of time with my kids in the afternoon and things like that. Um, so I get my best trying to get like no sleep. I think sleep is very important. I think it's good for your health, and I think it's good for your productivity. So I don't advocate people do that if you want to get good performance, but if you want to practice being tired for a while before your first child, maybe it's something you want to try. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm wondering, what during this time, let's say, you have a lot of stuff going on. You're working full time. You have your first kid. You're doing all these side projects. Off building skills. Waking up super early. What's motivating you? Do you have any long-term goals or long-term type of aspirations, or something that's helping you get through this time, or motivating you to get through this time?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly the money thing was very important. That was kind of the focus. But like I was saying before, really when my son was born, I saw, you know, the expenses that it took to have a child, and I wanted him to have better. I wanted him to have what we wanted for him. I wanted to be able to have flexibility and have options to be able to decide how we wanted to raise our child, how we wanted him to grow and learn and things like that. And so I kind of, it was that, driving motivation of freedom really, that pushed me to do that every day. And something else I did, when I talk about like eliminating distractions and things like that, I don't think I watched a single movie or TV show for 3 years, 4 years during that time, and so I did give up a lot of entertainment and things that, they're fine, they're great, they have value, and it's great to relax and enjoy things with other people. But I think having that intense focus for those years is what really helped me make a transition into building something valuable for other people. And certainly now I'm in a totally different spot in my life where, I'm making a decent income. There's a lot less pressure to get all of my work done in 2 hours in a day. And so, I think people underestimate intensity sometimes, where, for a couple of years, if you really do want to break the mold and change, you're in the course of your entire life, then you kind of do have to step up to the plate and deliver every day.
Mm-hmm. How is it working on your own? So you no longer, when did you stop? When did you leave your full-time job at Corning?
Yeah, so I left about 2 years after I started Closet Tools. It was when Closet Tools started making close to twice as much as I was making at Corning. Was when I was like, okay, like I'm just gonna do this now. It was kind of surprising to my coworkers because, I actually got pretty decent performance reviews, and people really didn't really suspect anything. So it was surprising to them. They're like, wait, you're quitting your job for good? Like, you're not just going to like go part-time or something. I'm like, yeah, like I don't have any reason to, I'm doing well, like, and so it was really interesting, but yeah, working on my own, I do prefer it. I prefer having um, the lack of responsibility for other people, and that's mostly in terms of like an employment perspective. Like if I were to employ people to work with me, I think then I would feel obligated to show up, the 9 to 5, and really, have some other things in place that was, be more reliable. But having the flexibility, working on my own, to be able to work whenever I want, and just have a lack of responsibility, it's actually been very nice. I think the one downside is not there's two things. It's at Corning, I was exposed to such cool technology. I mean, just some of the things that were in the building, multi-million-dollar lasers that can do high precision, measurements, and, working with mechanical engineers, and they had, the 3D printers, and they had the metal shop, and they could lathe and mill out these really cool products and things like that. And then also being surrounded by, 10 really highly skilled optical engineers that are just brilliant people. That's a pretty cool environment to be in, and you feel like it's important. You feel like you're working towards something with people, and you're making something that's really valuable. So I kind of miss that. But the freedom and flexibility, definitely, for my family and for me, that's a huge win. And I don't know, if I ever got to the point where, maybe I exit Closet Tools, or, where I'm financially stable enough to where I don't have to keep working, who knows? I probably would pick up some sort of job or something just to be with people and work on something together. It wouldn't be for the income, but, it would be fun to work with people for sure.
Interesting. Yeah. Where does I mean, was that when you left your job, was that about 2 years ago then or so?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. It was 28. It was the fall of 2018, so it'll be about
Okay.
3 years coming up in
All
this
right.
fall. Yeah.
Got it. What does your student debt look like right now, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's probably down to about 50K now.
Okay.
We kind of got to a point where, and I was talking to you about this before the podcast started, like we just bought a house. There's some other expenses and things that we've been saving for and investing in. So, we bought a piece of land too next to our house. So we kind of we got our debt to a very manageable place where it's like almost zero impact on our finances. And, we're kind of using some of our finances to get to a point where we like to be with our family. We have a nice place for our kids to grow up. We have, some of these things that we've kind of wanted. And so I think now that we have the house and we have, some of these other big expenses out of the way, definitely like debt is kind of the next focus. Because, as stable as Closet Tools has been, it still has quite a bit of platform risk. Like you mentioned before, Poshmark can do one thing and my business is completely eliminated. So I do want to get to the point financially where things are incredibly stable, very minimal bills, and Closet Tools could go to essentially zero and I would still be okay. So that's kind of the next, I would say probably 2 years of our lives, is really eliminating all debt and all risk, and then switching hard right into investing and preparing for a long-term retirement plan.
Mm-hmm. Got it. I'm wondering, you've shared a story before, which kind of seems like perhaps a low point, where you and your wife, were driving into a gas station late at night. It was super cold, and you saw someone with a duffel bag on the side sitting down. It seemed like they didn't have a place to stay, and your wife prodded you to try to help or ask about this person. And so you guys went to find out the person's situation. Can you kind of share what happened in that story and what impact that left with you?
Yeah, so I wrote about this on my blog. It's a story called "I'll Never Be Poor Again," and it was a real low point. It was probably about 2 years into when I was kind of learning new skills, and I was I was at this point where I wasn't making any additional income, but yet expenses were piling up more. We just had our kid, and things were getting more expensive, and I wasn't making any more money. So we were basically living paycheck to paycheck, had a bunch of credit card debt, just not really financially stable. And yeah, the story was, we were on our way home from an event, and we stopped at a gas station, and yeah, there was a homeless guy there, and he had a duffel bag, and he had nowhere to go, and it was really cold. It was probably about, it was probably the 30s. Shouldn't be outside, definitely. And so, my wife really wanted me to help him, and at the time she wasn't as involved in the finances, knowing what the numbers were, anything like that. So she didn't really necessarily understand. But in the back of my mind, I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. And so we did pick him up, and we brought him to a motel. And we get to the motel, and in the back of my mind, I kind of know, like, I don't think I have enough to even cover this. I think payday was like the next day or something like that. So it was like we had already spent all of the money that we could for that week, for that paycheck. And, we were waiting till payday to buy groceries and things like that. So we brought him in, and the bill ended up being like $84 or something like that. And I only had $60 in my debit account. All of our credit cards were maxed out, so I had no extra, money to pull from. And yeah, it was a pretty gut-wrenching moment because it was a betrayal of trust. Like we basically told this guy, hey, we'll help you out, and then we didn't help him out. I think afterwards we dropped him off at a Walmart or something like that, and he said he would walk around for the night, which is ridiculous. That's insane. And so after that moment, I got pretty fed up with the financial situation that I was in. I was really aggravated by being poor, and poor is relative. Like, obviously I wasn't poor. I made 70, 80K as an engineer. There's a lot of other people that make less money and are very happy and satisfied. But the whole financial situation was just not good. And that was when I really got fed up with things, and I was very frustrated about being in that scenario, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And when was that exactly? Was that before you started Closet Tools, or right around that time?
Yeah, it would have been before. It would have been before Closet Tools. It probably was like the winter before. I started Closet Tools in like March of 2018. So
Okay.
probably it was like that previous November or something like that. So probably a few months before then.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, I had learned skills. I had spent already a couple of years learning skills. I was probably working on that trucking app during that time. Um, and so yeah, it really did hit that point. And even I remember too, right when I started Closet Tools, and it started making $500, $1,000 a month. I remember asking my dad for help, actually, financially, because I was like, hey, I have this thing, it's making money. I think we can get in a better scenario, but like, do you mind kind of getting rid of some of this credit card debt for me? Because like we're still just, but we're below water. We're not treading water right now. Like, every dollar is going to payments that should have been paid months ago. And so, that was also kind of a low point too, but that was kind of the turning point where it kind of broke us free a little bit to then be able to start stack up a little bit of savings and actually move forward financially. And from there, obviously things have grown and increased, and we're doing really well now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a lot of financial mismanagement, and having very little financial education growing up, and blindly taking on all of that student loan debt, not really knowing the impact it would have on my future life. And just there's a lot there that I wouldn't, that I don't want to pass on to my kids, and I don't want to pass on to anybody else.
Did you have any clue when you were taking on the student debt in college that it would have kind of this burden, this impact? And did you even know the payments would be, that large?
Nope, I had no idea. I just knew that, like, if I wanted to go to school, it was all loans. And basically I grew up in a single income family. My dad was a high school teacher. So he did okay, but it wasn't anything crazy. And I didn't have any support from him financially going to college. So it was, you either loan it out or you're not going, basically. And it was interesting. I don't know why I was advised to go to RIT. Um, it was a great school, and honestly, it's interesting. I don't like regret it. Obviously, right now it's kind of painful, like paying off all the student loans. But I think like, if I never went to RIT, who knows if I would have been exposed to code? Who knows the people I would have been exposed to, the things I would have learned, the opportunities I would have had. So it's an interesting one. It's a bit of a catch-22 where it was probably a bad decision, but at the end of the day, my life is the way it is now, mostly because of that. So, it's an interesting one. I think that I think it comes down to how you respond to events and situations in life. And I think you can make pretty much anything work. It's kind of like parenting or getting married. Like you're never ready. You're never 100% ready to do it. That you can't. There's no financial stability. There's no way that you can be 100% prepared for those types of events. And unless you actually go through them, you can't figure out how to kind of push past those things. And so I think it is really more about how you respond to events rather than trying to make the absolute best decision for your future life. At least early on, I would say, when you have little resources.
So going back to this kind of homeless person not able to help, but actually not just not being able to help, but actually feeling like you couldn't make do of your word, like you broke your promise to help this person, and having this resolve to fix this problem. At that time and in the ensuing months, what was your way out? Like, where did you what did you think, like, this is my way out. Here's my path out to, let's say, financial stability and financial wealth?
Yeah, so actually, right before I started Closet Tools, I actually started another product that I was working on. It was called Blacklit, and what it was a black paper notebook. You could think like a moleskin with black paper. And so, I had been learning these skills. I learned how to make a landing page. I learned how to do Facebook ads. I was putting Facebook ads on a credit card. I was pushing this thing, and I had manufacturer lined up in, I think it was in Taiwan, that was going to make the notebooks. And I ran a Kickstarter, and I needed something like 13K to get my first 1,000 books or something. And I ended up getting somewhere around 10K in support. So that was originally my plan, to kind of this is my entry into entrepreneurship. So that was actually just a couple months before I started Closet Tools. And obviously the issue with that is it's very capital heavy, and I didn't have a lot of money. I'm actually really glad it failed, because I don't think it would have been nearly as successful as Closet Tools is today. But that was almost immediately, that was what I worked on that winter, was getting that product started and out the door. But ultimately it wasn't successful. And that was when I really just learned that you need to do something that does not cost money. and really the only skill I had that didn't cost money was code. And so I focused on the code thing. And by that time I had already made the what we called it, the button, the little script for my wife. So it just kind of led to, okay, I have this other thing that's already kind of working. I'm going to step into that now, and I'm going to push that.
Awesome. You mentioned Hacker News earlier in the conversation. So news.ycombinator.com. I'm a big fan for many, many, many years. But how influenced were you, or how did you get impacted by the larger, let's say, developer community, or let's say the whole indie hacker movement, or various people doing solo enterprises with entrepreneurship, software, etc.? What was your exposure to that group, and how did it impact you?
Yeah, I joined Indie Hackers very early on because it was promoted on Hacker News. And I'm not even sure how I found out about Hacker News. I think it might have, I actually I was more on Reddit back then, and it probably was from some Reddit thread that I found out about Hacker News. But then through Hacker News, I found out about Indie Hackers pretty early on, when it got started, when, Cortland was, trying to make a website that was actually profitable and selling advertising and things like that. But I was heavily impacted. I think, especially when I learned that there's a lot more to making an app than just writing the code. There's a lot of business stuff, and there's, marketing and distribution, and there's a lot more, managing customers, customer service, and things like that. There's a lot more to it than just writing the code. And so that was what I learned through Indie Hackers, and by watching other people do that type of thing. And I think Indie Hackers was so profound for me, having a place to be a beginner and get insight from other people. One of my first posts on Indie Hackers, I didn't know how to integrate Stripe into my Closet Tools app. It was like I had just launched the free version. I wanted to build the front end interface, and I wanted to build people in the app. I didn't know what webhooks were. I didn't know anything about how any of that automation worked. And I sent a message on Indie Hackers, and a guy spent probably about an hour with me explaining how the back end of Stripe works and how you need to set up webhooks that listen to billing events and set up accounts. And after that, it clicked really well. But without having that support, it would have been really hard to just go from scratch and dig through the Stripe documentation to figure out how it all worked. It would have been a long process to do that. And so that type of support really helped me early on. And that's part of the reason why I like to contribute back to the community today, because I feel like when you're in a position where I am now, you do have a lot of insights you can offer people to help them skip some steps that would trip them up otherwise. And so that was it's invaluable, that community. And it also just gave you confidence to do it. There was people launching things all the time. Sometimes it was great, sometimes it was a flop, but it gave you the confidence to at least try something. And I think that really helped make Closet Tools a reality for me, for sure.
Did any of the kind of examples or people that were successful and kind of highlighted in podcasts or on the site, let's say for Indie Hackers or other places, like making, let's say, 10, 20,000 a month, 50 or 100,000 a month, did any of those examples kind of inspire you, or were kind of like, evidence or proof that it could be done? And did that help you at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to come up with specific examples. When Indie Hackers first started, it wasn't so popular that there was a lot of products listed on there. Certainly like a Peter Levels is kind of the original Indie Hacker kind of North Star, where you develop a product and or a series of products, and he was making close to $1 million a year doing that. But I think because of my skills that I had built working with people that were not in tech, I think it made it a little unique, where I was solving problems. Like my customers, probably not a single one of my customers follows me on Twitter. It's all tech people, and it's all my Indie Hacker friends. But I'm not selling to them. I'm selling to to moms that want to spend more time with their kids instead of sharing on Poshmark. And so I think that's what made it pretty unique, at least as far as Indie Hackers goes. There's a lot of products on there that are basically developers selling tools to developers. And so I think I was inspired by the minimal approach of building something that's valuable but doesn't have to be super massive. You don't need 1 million customers. You only need 100 customers or 1,000 customers. Building something that solves one problem. It doesn't have to be this huge suite of tools or anything like that. And so I think that kind of minimal approach was very attractive to me, and it fit well with my skills and my perspectives. And but I think as far as the business side goes, I was definitely in a more unique spot where I was kind of on my own, where I'm like, hey, I'm making software for people that are not developers. So it's very different, even just from a marketing perspective and a community perspective, for sure.
Yeah, great. For those who don't know, Peter Levels, he started a site called Nomad List, and it's been a very successful site, and a very, very vocal proponent of bootstrapping and launching your own business online. I'm wondering, 5 years from now, do you think it's going to be easier or more difficult to start kind of a bootstrapped kind of online business, or is it going to be mixed? Is it going to be easier in some ways and harder in some ways? Like what's your take? Like, let's say, for example, 5 years from now, do you envision, something, what you did with Closet Tools being easier, more difficult, or will the opportunities just be different and you'll have to adapt? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think obviously I think it'll be a mix. I think things like building a business on the internet will only get easier. Billing will only get easier. It'll only ever get more automatic. It'll only ever get more accessible to more people. So the actual like creating something that people can pay for will be much easier. The creating valuable things with code, I think that's what's going to get interesting in the future, because I do think a lot of things will become commoditized. And I think that's what's, I alluded to before is somewhat unique about my approach, is that, I'm trying to solve problems in markets that aren't already saturated with code. And so that's something that's, I think, a huge piece of advice for, entrepreneurs and people getting started, especially in tech. There's a lot of huge markets out there that have not been stormed with code and automation and things like that you could do very well in. But they're not flashy, they're not sexy, they're not, what's on the front of, Product Hunt or anything like that. It's you solving real problems for, real people. Like one of the when I was building the trucking app with a friend, he actually he wanted to turn it into a SaaS and offer it as a product to other people. And one of the client calls we had was with a trucking company that managed all of the heads of cattle for Tyson, basically. So they had like thousands of heads of cattle, and they would drive them around in these trucks. And, it was still the same process. You wanted to, have receipts for picking up and dropping off and things like that. But, like they managed it in like, they had a couple things in Excel, and they had like paper receipts that you had to turn in different times and things like that. So, and that's like, you're talking probably a 50 million, $100 million business that is, basically managed on an Excel spreadsheet. And so, that I think when you expose yourself to those different types of markets that are very practical and very, necessary for even just like the economy and the country, then you can kind of step into some places where you can come in from as a beginner and as an individual and contribute meaningfully and help people out. And it's not something that has already been done by, huge tech platforms like Google and Amazon and Facebook and stuff like that.
Interesting. I want to dive into a bit about kind of business lessons learned, kind of what's the essence of business, and kind of from a bigger picture, like through your past, working out of debt, starting your own business, doing multiple projects, etc. Also learning from, various people, like where are you in your understanding of business? Like what is the essence of business for you? Like what is the core that you're like, this is what I understand business to be. This is my competitive insight in terms of how I understand business.
Yeah, I think, the my core ethos about business is just focusing on value. And for at least for B2B businesses, what's valuable is what saves people time, saves them money, or makes them more money. That's really all they care about. And I think focusing on that as your core product or your core offering is something that is pretty underrated, at least for indie hackers. If you're a big tech startup and you're taking on investing and you want to get, 1 billion users, free users, so that you can then arbitrage them with ads or something like that. Like, yeah, that's totally different. That's a different value you're providing. But if you want to build something that's very valuable to somebody, and you want to have it manageable by yourself, you want to have 100 customers, 1,000 customers, and make a living doing it, then you have to focus on a core product that saves people time, makes them more money, or saves them money. And I think that just really focusing on that helps put in perspective the type of things that you should build for other people. And I think the other thing is, from a sustainability standpoint, I think some of the unique insight I have is building things that are manageable by one person. So one of the things that I think I've done well that wasn't really on purpose at first, but certainly is on purpose now, is using content and documentation as both a way to free up some of your time so that you're not spending all of your time doing customer support, but also doubling it as marketing and content marketing for SEO. I think that has allowed me to spend a very minimal time doing customer support, which allows me to spend more time building automations and things that help the customers, provide them more value. And then in the end, I'm doing better as a business because I'm able to just continually provide more value and not spend time one-on-one with customers trying to solve problems and things like that. So I think from a solo, indie hacker perspective, I think those two things are pretty valuable for sure.
With time and money, like, where does that insight come from that, the core thing or the core value proposition should be either saving money or saving time, making money, or saving money? Yeah, where does that come from? Where does that insight come from? And why, what's so valuable or important about time and money as a value proposition?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think the insight, comes from just my personal experience. There's a lot of things that I was spending time doing in the past that I didn't want to spend time doing, or, there's things that code can solve that are very expensive problems. So like if I go back to my Corning days, um, some of the products we were building were, $2-3 million a pop. They would take about a month to build. Some of the lithography stacks that we were building. And my job, I was a test engineer is what they called me. So I would actually build automations for testing products and testing the performance of them. And I remember very specifically one of the things that I did before I really realized that my skills were super valuable was I took one of the tests that they were doing. It would take 5 people about a week's worth of time for 5 people to perform the tests. And me and a couple other engineers made a dedicated test suite for this specific test. And it took that process from 5 people taking an entire week to 1 person taking about a half hour to do the exact same thing. And when you're talking about multi-million-dollar products, the salary of 5 different people for an entire week, cutting that down to a half hour, that's incredibly valuable for the business. And that alone would have paid multiples of my salary, if you were to contract that out to somebody else. And so I think, I think that insight of saving time and saving money came from that engineering background of automating internal testing things or internal testing tools. And so, it kind of was an unspoken thing that I kind of just naturally, gravitated towards, but that specific project was what made me realize this is very, very valuable when you can save that much time for a company, the amount of dollars it actually saves and the amount of time it actually saves. Because now not only does it save them that time, that expense, but then those people can spend time working on other projects and making new projects for the company and stuff like that. So there's a lot of advantages to that.
Do you think on the consumer side, it's different? I mean, are there different values in time and money that might be equal or higher, or what's your take on the consumer side?
Yeah, I think on the consumer side, I mean, I think those things are still a priority, but there's other things that are also a priority. There's like, there's protection, there's rest and relaxation, there's entertainment, there's satisfaction, food and, things like that. So there's a lot of other things at play. I think from a business perspective, it's all about, am I making more money? Or am I saving time? That's what's going to make the business go forward. So I think on the consumer side, yeah, people care about their time. They don't want to spend all of their time doing something that's going to, not play out as a good investment in the end. So they do care a little bit about it, but they're probably less apt to pay for things directly that do that, at least software automations and things like that, unless it is directly providing them with some source of income or something like that. And so I personally don't have experience selling B2C. I try to do that with the Kickstarter, and I think it would have been fine. There's huge markets all over the place in people spending money for no reason. That's actually one of the things that, at least for me, what I've seen, physical products are so much easier to sell to people than digital products. Like I have this microphone here, I think it was like $200 or something like that. That was no sweat. I knew exactly what it did. I watched a YouTube video. I knew exactly how it sounded. I knew exactly what I was going to use it for. You didn't have to be educated on the product. Whereas with Closet Tools, somebody comes in, as, not even a very technical person. They have to figure out how to install this tool. They have to register for an account. Then they try out a free trial, and they have to figure out if it works for them. Now they have to figure out the optimal way to use it to get the best performance out of it. So there's a lot of education involved in selling software. And so I think that's a pretty huge barrier for selling software in the future, for sure, for people.
Mm-hmm. If you were to do it all over again, like today, do you think you could, I mean, how important do you think was it for you to learn how to code? I mean, obviously it was one of the foundations for everything you did, but let's say going forward, do you really need to know how to code the intricacies? Could you still do it? Let's say knowing some higher kind of, let's say business principles, marketing principles, understanding software, how it works, and then just contracting that out to someone, directing them, telling them what to do. Do you think that setup could work for you as an alternative?
Yeah, I think 100% that could work. I think, to me, code is really interesting because you're right. It is something that can be, commoditized. It can be done by other people as employees and things like that. But I do think there's a unique way you can use code to even automate processes just for yourself, internal tooling and things like that, that I think that can be incredibly valuable and be done very quickly. And you can cut out a lot of time spending time on things they would normally be doing over and over and over again. So I think, yeah, code is really interesting because you're right. It can be commoditized. It can be, done by anybody. But when you know how to do it yourself, you can make very custom solutions for very specific problems that you have. And I would say coding is really only second to writing and being able to think clearly and write clearly, and which I guess boils down to effective communication. I think that's probably the number one skill for any entrepreneur, is being able to not only think clearly, but be able to communicate effectively with other people, whether it's customers or, other people you're working with, through systems and processes, standard operating procedures, things like that. If you're not able to communicate effectively, everything's going to be inefficient. And it's going to be a lot harder than if you were to communicate very effectively. So I think that's kind of my hierarchy of what's important. I think that the writing and the communicating is probably number one in any business. If that's not in place, then it's probably going to be very hard to do anything well. But then right below that, I would say, is code. I mean, I think if you know how to code, just even understanding, the architecture of automating things in general, and just having a systems level approach to solving problems, I think is very valuable for sure.
Mm-hmm. So you talk about, writing, communicating on top, and then you have code. I've noticed, like, with programming, developing software, there's actually a lot of stuff involved, I mean, we're talking about, coming up with new features or kind of a goal where this product is headed, designing those features, architecting those features, coding those features out, testing, getting, feedback back, iterating on those features, building new feature sets. And it seems like in some ways coding is part of that process, but there's a whole other monster of a process where it's like, how do you even know what to code? It's like you have to come up with a lot of, ideas and iterate and feedback and design and all this stuff. In your mind, is all that just coding? Or, I mean, how do you, wrap your mind around the whole process?
No, you're 100% right. All of that is definitely not coding. I think if you have all of those things in place very well, the coding is very easy and very straightforward. The coding is mostly a means to, bring it to life and bring it to pass. Certainly the other things are much more important. Is this process simple for the user to interact with and get what they need to get done, completed? How valuable is this to the user? What problem does this solve for them? Those are all things that are way more important and should be thought about ahead of time. And I think, there's a balance, right? Like, you don't want to you don't want to be so out in the weeds that you can't just start, coding things up and testing things and trying things out and seeing if things are valuable. There's certain things that you just know, like, yes, this is going to be very valuable for the customer and I should do this. But other times it's like, hey, we should try this and see how our customers use it and see if they use it in different ways than we thought you would use it and stuff like that. So I think there's a balance for sure.
Yeah, I noticed that it seems like, coding is part of that process, but over time, finding the right thing to code is extremely important, because you could be spending a million hours coding something that people don't want, or, it's not going to add a ton of value to the customer. But how do you find, the things to develop? And I'm guessing this is for you with Closet Tools. I mean, do you consider this another hat that you wear, kind of this whole, where is this thing going? Project development, feature development, design, and how do you prioritize that with just, the coding of features? Like, how do you balance those two things?
Yeah, I try to do my best to build building blocks that can be used for other solutions in the tool. And so, like, one of the things I've done is, Poshmark doesn't have an API. There's no public API where you can just plug in a REST, command and you can, get data from the tool. I had to figure that all out myself, but I basically rebuilt the entire Poshmark API. And so now I can then reuse that bundle of code in a way where I can do a whole bunch of different automations for people. And there's still things that I'm building today that are using that block. And so I think kind of having almost like you could kind of consider it almost like a first principles approach, where you're trying to build these lower level building blocks that you can reuse and use in different features. And even just from a UI perspective, the way that I do certain things tends to be almost replicated in other ways. And the way that I automate things, by clicking one button, it does this thing. I try to keep that structure very stable across the platform so that when they hit a button, they kind of really understand, okay, this is exactly what it's going to do, because that's what it did on this feature and it did it on this feature. So I know this is exactly what it's going to do. So yeah, I think that's kind of a way that I've made it sustainable for me. I think if you build way too many features and you build way too many very segregated things, it's very hard to maintain because, if something goes wrong, you're digging into code that's only written, once, and it's used in a very special use case, and testing is hard. Whereas if something goes wrong and it's a fundamental building block, then, you know exactly where it is and you can fix it, and it fixes a bunch of different things on the app and things like that. So, yeah. And I think honestly, a lot of that experience came from my coding experience there. Because I was building automations and, there was something that my boss actually instilled in me a lot, was making code that was reusable and that you could actually build, add into other applications that you're building in the future, because it saved you a lot of time, by being able to reuse solutions, problems you've already solved, bring that solution into this new tool or something like that. And that was something that I learned there a lot.
Do you do all the design yourself?
Yeah, and you can hardly call it design. I mean, it's okay. A design is definitely not my strong suit. I try to outsource that as much as I can to CSS frameworks and other people that know how to do design. And I kind of just copy other people's designs for things. I think I was kind of trying to copy with Closet Tools. What happens is you install the Chrome extension and it kind of pops up almost like a chatbot would on a website. And so basically I was trying to directly copy, an intercom or something like that with that style of application. So yeah, really just kind of gleaning design insights from other people. It's definitely not my strong suit, and I don't spend much time thinking about that. I think I have taken, during that time when I was learning new skills and I was taking courses and things like that, I did take a design course, and kind of one of the fundamental things that they taught was design is so much more about function than it is about the way that it looks. And obviously there is importance to the way it looks, and they actually taught to, design in grayscale so that you can have high contrast and you have very specific contrasts for different types of things you want to do in the app and things like that. But it's so much more about like, signaling and communicating to the user what's happening and what happens when they press this button and things like that. I think those are pretty important in parts of design for sure.
Mm-hmm. You've mentioned in your Twitter feed and blog posts and interviews about the importance of your family and kind of the priority you place on that. Can you share a bit more about that in terms of kind of how you deal with family work balance? I notice it seems like in your story, your wife is kind of more taking more of the family roles. You seems like you're more on the business side. How has that worked out? And what's your kind of philosophy and approach with all that?
Yeah, I think it's something that will evolve over time. I think right now, because I have very young kids, my oldest son is 4 and I have my third child is 8 months. Right now, it is more about just having the flexibility and time to manage, the changes in everyday life. And I think, yeah, and you're right. So like, yeah, my wife isn't really involved in the business at all. And she's, would be considered like a homemaker. She stays home with the kids. But we do have, some agreements where she actually does a lot of art and things like that. So she actually does have some time, most days to spend a couple hours doing that, and I'll take over the kids and things like that. So, so there is a little bit of a balance there. But a lot of my priority is making my work sustainable enough so that I don't have to spend all day working and I can actually spend, a significant amount of time with my kids. And I think that was something, my dad did growing up. He was a teacher, but he taught at the same school that we were at. So we did get to hang out with him a lot. And we also played sports, and he was usually, somewhat involved in the coaching and things like that. So I think being modeled that involvement from my dad kind of instilled in me that that's something that's important. That's something that I liked when I was a kid. And so I want my kids to have the opportunity to spend time with their dad and, just watch what he's doing and just being involved with them. I think my ideal goal is to, build some sort of business in the future where I can have my kids directly involved and they can contribute meaningfully to, whatever it is, especially if it's like a physical product business or something like that. I think that would be so much fun because not only are you spending time with your kids, but you're being productive with them and you're showing them real skills that they can have for the future. And so, yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about, parenting and things like that. And, everybody's situation is different. And, there's some people we talk to and, they'll go on business trips for, 2 weeks and they don't see their family. And to me, I don't think that's really worth it. But for some people, it is worth it. And, everybody's different in that way. And there's certain kids that grow up with no parent involvement and they end up fine. There's certain kids that grow up where their parents were home all the time and playing with them and they end up not that great. So I don't think it's random, but I do think that, there's a lot of different ways to do parenting. And I think this is just kind of my primary way of doing it for sure.
Do you usually work out of the house?
Yeah. So the original place I was in, I actually have a workshop that's actually attached to my garage. So it's like in the house, but it's nice because it's somewhat isolated from the house. So yeah, I work from home now exclusively. When I was doing, when I was building closet tools and when I was like learning skills, I did start out at home, but then I ended up actually working at Starbucks most days. They would open up at around 6. So I think one shop actually opened at 5:30. But what was nice about that is I had fast internet and they let you work there, and most, pretty much everybody else that was there was doing some sort of work. So it was actually a good co-working environment almost. And so, having that little bit of isolation from family to be able to get that focused, deep work in for a few hours is great. And then, what's nice about being home is you just, you're right there. So, so I can get away for a few hours, get everything done that I need to get done and then head right back to family. So,
yeah, over the years, I've spent probably thousands of hours working out of Starbucks. It was like my
That's awesome.
main office for many, many years.
Yep.
Yeah, I have a lifetime indebtedness to Starbucks for all that they provided.
Yep.
What's your take on approach with screen time with your kids? I know you have 3 very young kids. I mean, are you letting them, watch TV, computers, iPhones, whatever, or not?
Yeah, I think people would probably consider us strict, but I think, definitely the focus is on not being on screens all the time. Um, and what we do is, rather than focusing on not being on screens, we try to really emphasize the value of other things that they could be doing with their time and with their attention. We one kind of thing that I instilled for me and my wife and now my family is that anytime you see a book that you would remotely want, you buy it 100% anytime. And this actually backfired on me last year because I bought a lot of books and I haven't read them. So I kind of committed to reading some of them this year because I was buying a lot more than I was reading. But what it kind of instilled was there's a priority in reading and in educating yourself and in building knowledge and spending time on something where you're not being distracted. You're actually intentionally spending your time. And so even with my kids, we'll go grocery shopping and we'll go by the kids aisle, and we'll go down and every single time I'll buy them a book. It doesn't matter. It could be, some random book about unicorns or something like that, but I'll always buy them a book. And number one, it keeps them entertained throughout the store. They can flip through the pages and stuff like that. But number two is it gets them used to just picking up a new book and just, reading it. And that's kind of the norm, is like, yeah, books are great. And so, yeah, I don't really know how it's going to play out in the end. I think we do have some screen time. Every once in a while we'll watch a TV show or something like that. And, I would say we keep it probably under, a half hour, an hour a day or something like that. Every once in a while they'll play a game on the iPad or something like that. It's a little bit relaxed, but like I said, there is a lot more emphasis on the priority of reading and spending your time doing other things. That was one of the reasons why I mentioned earlier, we bought a lot next to us. It's a 6-acre lot next to us. I want my kids to have a place to explore, and it's all woods. I plan on building some structures and things like that. Like I want my kids to be able to be outside and explore and have fun outside, and expand their attention span for just being entertained by things that are not highly distracting. And now my son, he's 4 now, and we're starting to pay him to do some jobs around the house. So if he like cleans up dinner and puts everything in the dishwasher, we'll give him $1 or something like that. But all of those things help keep him not focused on, hey, I should be watching something on TV, but it's just doing things that are productive and good for his future, kind of thing. So
yeah. Have you watched on YouTube? There's like these primitive building videos where people
I've seen
building
those.
like
Yeah,
clay houses and clay, just like crazy structures.
Yeah.
I showed my kids some of these videos and they're just fascinated by it. Now they're like building stuff out of whatever they can build, like Amazon boxes, crazy structures.
Yep. Oh, that's another thing is Legos. 100%. We buy a lot of Legos, and that's another thing that my son, he'll spend he'll get a new Lego set and you won't see him for the next few hours because he's just focused on that, which is really cool.
Yeah, there's something your 4-year-old might be a little bit too young, but I started getting my my son something called snap circuits. Have you heard of them? They're electronic circuit pieces that you can start to make like real electronic projects, like thousands of them. And I got my first, I think when my son was 4 years old, I was like, hey, play with it, but he didn't really have much interest. It was only the past like 6 months or so, maybe it was at 5.5, where he just, something went off, the light bulb. And it's like Legos, but it's like building electronics. It's like crazy. So, some fun stuff.
Yeah, we actually just last week, because that's my background, is electrical engineering. So he broke a toy. It was like it had like a screen on it and some buttons and a speaker and stuff like that. And we actually disassembled it, and I showed him all the different parts, and he thought it was pretty cool. You could see the speaker and hear it, and like, when you push a button, this is what happens and things like that. So I love tinkering with stuff with them and show them what I'm doing. That's actually another thing too, like in my office, if they come out and they wander out, I'll show them what I'm working on. And for a while, my son thought that my job was like the notes app on my computer. Cause like, he was like, yeah, like you just write notes all day. Like that's what you do, you know, it's like, you know, and so, you know, I like to involve them in what I'm doing. And so that's why I kind of want to build some sort of business where, like I said, like almost like a physical business where like they could have more hands-on approach to like contributing. But you know, I would assume I'm going to teach my kids to code. I'm not 100% sure, but you know, I think that's definitely in the future for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. Like we don't really do much screen time at all in terms of like TV or entertainment, but we do let our kids here and there like play with the computer and the phone in terms of like different like photo app or notes app or like just different functions on the computer and stuff. And it's funny because like my 6-year-old, he just turned 6. But there's something about just doing like 10 or 15 minutes. It's too short for him. Like he's always wanting, you know, to interact more with it. But that in a way is like, I think it's causing more curiosity because like he doesn't have enough. And so he's like dreaming of all these like apps and stuff that he can create. And we had this, we have this stencil kit, this iPhone stencil kit. We haven't used like for years and years. And he found it, and you can stencil, you know, different, you know, stuff. And he found it, and it was like his holy grail of toys. He started to write down like design apps, you know, and they're kind of like really like crazy apps. And he has like probably like 50 to 100 pages of apps just in the past like 3 weeks. Awesome. And I never would have imagined a 6-year-old would like be so interested in the interaction, you know, design of software. I'm like, it's so crazy. Yeah, I'm curious with money. Like my take is I'm kind of reserved, cautious on teaching my kids about how money works in today's world because it just is so powerful. Like whatever money you have, it's like you can get almost anything you want in this life, products or services, and it almost in a way over attaches in a sense, I think, kids to money and the power that money can have in this world. Like, what's your take? How are you teaching your kids about money? Do you have concerns about their attachment to it as well?
Yeah, I think I definitely want the thing I want to avoid is, you know, the consumerism type behavior where like literally money is only used for spending it on things. And I think I want to focus more on the exchange of value for money and just teaching them how to be valuable and what's valuable to other people so that they don't really have to worry about where they're going to get money from, if that makes sense. So I want to be less about like the actual dollars and more about like, how can I be a functioning, productive, valuable member of society? And then money doesn't really have a huge, you know, it's not a big concern because it happens and I'm valuable, so I get paid kind of thing. And as far as like specifically money education, you know, I think it's tough. I mean, I think even I don't have the greatest financial plan and like, you know, just the most intricate system for even my own finances. So I think it's something that will evolve over time. And you know, one thing I will do is I'll be very open about how I spend my money and how I, you know, use where I get my money from and, you know, how I spend it and things like that. And I like to spend a lot of money on convenience and things that save me time. And so, you know, I don't spend money on a lot of like things, you know, I don't buy a lot of clothes. I don't buy, you know, nice cars. Like I drive an old 2006 Toyota Corolla, you know, like that's falling apart, you know, it's just not a priority to me, but, you know, I'll spend, you know, $1,000 to save, you know, time doing something, you know, just about any time. So I think that's probably what I'll pass on for sure.
You mentioned one of the most influential books you've read was The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. How did that kind of change your perspective? What did you learn about it? How did it impact you?
Yeah, it was right around the time when I did the Blacklit. So, you know, you've read The 4-Hour Workweek?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, you know, like, of course, the whole thing is, you know, a physical product business that he, you know, goes through the process of first being very stressed out about running because it's being, you know, it's successful and he's doing everything himself. And then he goes through the process of automating pretty much everything in the business so that he doesn't have to spend any time on it, but it still runs itself. And I think that was the book that really just introduced me to entrepreneurship and just at least solo entrepreneurship. Like, how can I, as an individual, start a business? And I think it was just very pivotal to understand, some of the different aspects of what it takes to even run a business and to even make a product and things like that. Like, I don't even think I knew what the word product was before I read that book. I just never thought about selling things and, that type of stuff. So it was just a very eye-opening book for just entering into entrepreneurship. And I think it was super valuable because it did lean towards that minimal style business where it does cut out the things that don't matter and it emphasizes the things that do matter. And I think that's a really good approach going into entrepreneurship for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I read that super early on when it first came out, and it kind of casted a vision of, I think, the leverage that you could have in this internet connected world where you can have a bunch of people working for you, but not be working, all those hours that it requires. Kind of the power of delegating, but kind of on steroids in this globalized internet connected world. Fascinating stuff. I mean, I've always used, various just like people services just anywhere, everywhere, that can contribute to my business. Quant Secrets. So, earlier this year, you launched kind of a effort to learn algo trading, and I guess you were considering experimenting, trying to create some type of business from that. What was Quant Secrets? What were you trying to do with it, and then what happened for you to close it down eventually?
Yeah, so if you go to my Twitter profile, I have a pinned tweet, and it basically talks about this idea of going deep on a topic for a year and writing content about it, trying to grow some SEO, some marketing, and then building some sort of audience, and then building a product in that space, and then selling it to that audience. And so Quant Secrets was originally going to be my first approach to that. And I call it a deep year is what I call it. You're supposed to spend a year on it or something like that. And Quant Secrets, so yeah, you're right. I was trying to experiment, trying to build some algorithmic trading. I don't really have much interest in day trading and watching stocks and paying attention to companies and things like that. So I was like, I want something to do this for me. I know how to code. I've done all the math in college, and so I should be able to figure this out. And I was interested in doing it in crypto, mostly because it's just kind of popular, and I just wanted to get into that space. But what kind of happened is I did actually learn a lot. I was studying a lot. I was reading books. I was listening to podcasts. I was implementing things. I was testing things, and I got to the point where, after fees and other things, I was having a hard time beating just a buy and hold strategy. And even if I did, it was just like neck and neck. So I was like, why would I spend all my time building out this system if I can just enter the market and hold for a long time and do really well with it. So originally it was, and so earlier on in the podcast, I talked about the platform risk of closet tools and how it is risky. So I actually want to build something that can help kind of either, compensate on the side or eventually become something that I do more full time. I've actually had probably about 4 or 5 acquisition inquiries, and none of them bit because it just has that platform risk, and so it's like almost unsellable, but at the same time, I don't want to put all of my eggs into one basket. I don't want to like build a team and hire people and stuff like that. I would like to build something that's a little more fundamental and not so dependent on something else. So Quant Secrets was my first step into that. It's like building something that's platform independent, that, is valuable, and can be a potential income source in the future. And then it kind of just boiled down to, I enjoy building businesses. I didn't really like just building something for myself necessarily. And obviously you could turn in, if you built some sort of SaaS application where you could, provide trading or something like that for other people, there's things you can do in business. But I enjoyed just, building businesses for people. And I think the financial perspective, at least for me, from the capital that I have to deploy right now, building a business is a lot more financially stable future than just investing for me. So yeah, it was a little bit of that. And then like also it was taking a lot of energy and time from Closet Tools. I already have a pretty minimal work day. So if, I was spending quite a bit of time on Quant Secrets and not on Closet Tools, so things have stalled a little bit and it just kind of slowed down. So I want to get back to make sure that Closet Tools was growing and since it is my primary income source, and make sure that that's well taken care of. So yeah, so it was pretty disappointing because like I did want it to work out. I think it was something that I wanted to have, work out better than it did. But I think I wanted to cut it off early because I didn't want to spend a whole year doing something that I didn't end up wanting to do. I didn't want to be too attached to it where I couldn't shut it down and I couldn't let it, go the full course kind of thing. So yeah.
So yeah, actually I have that pinned tweet right here. So you say you're obsessed with this idea. You pick a niche that you're interested in, write and study daily about the topic, write 100 articles in a year, get SEO traffic, build an email list. So I'll stop here for a second. Right now, a lot of this seems to lead up to SEO and then building the list, right? So the whole interest writing articles, right? So you have SEO and the email list is kind of right now this corner piece. Then ask people what they want and build it. Sell products, physical, digital, and start fresh with a new niche next year. Why would you want to start with a different niche rather than just expanding kind of, what you've built?
Yeah, I mean, I think the start with a new one is mostly just my curiosity, and there's a lot of other things that I would like to learn and like to explore and get good at. Like one of my highly competing topics for the deep year, other than Quant Secrets, was actually like homeschooling, building a homeschooling curriculum, because that's eventually what we want to do with our kids. So I want to learn more about it. I want to be good at it, but I can also be good at it and help other people be good at it. And so I can learn some things and I can provide value for other people and I can build a business around that. And so like it kind of serves two purposes of like me being valuable for other people by learning hard skills and things that are complicated and trying distilling it into something that's more simple. But then it's also just satisfying my curiosity and things that I want to learn and things that I want to be good at. And so the SEO emphasis is more about the value of writing and less about the specific SEO. I think SEO is great just because it's a very automated marketing channel where you don't have to spend every day on it. You can write the content once and then it works for you all the time. But certainly there's other ways to promote your writing and to get feedback on your writing and to get better at writing and providing value for other people. And so that would definitely be part of the plan is, a content marketing approach in general. But the other thing is, I think with that system, by providing value upfront, the free value of valuable content helps build that audience, and it helps attract an audience to whatever you're building, and then once you enter that niche, then you can start to experience some of the problems that people are having, and you can start to automate some solutions, and you can start to provide and it doesn't have to be software. It can be physical products, it can be info products, it can be even services, it can be anything. But I think until you really go deep into a niche, you don't really understand what the fundamental problems are that you can solve. And so that's kind of what it's this framework for getting deep into a niche and not only building out the marketing and distribution, but also figuring out what's the real problems and how you can solve them.
Got it. So, I mean, it seems like it's kind of content in a niche you're really interested in. You build the audience, right? And then you solve problems from that the audience is facing, right, for them. And that's kind of like that flywheel. It seems like SEO has been like a super important part of Closet Tools. It still is probably one. It is your main, I guess, distribution or marketing channel, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Like, are you bullish on SEO going forward? Do you think? I mean, are we talking about has SEO been saturated with kind of more popular topics? Is the opportunity just more in the long tail in terms of these really niche, searches, etc., that isn't completely saturated by a million content farms and all these people playing games, or is there a different thing? Are you confident that you can actually do SEO well with even more popular topics? Like, what's your take?
Yeah, I think it has evolved a lot over the years, and especially in recent years, Google has gotten really good at finding what's really valuable for what the customer is looking for, or I guess it would be the user is looking for. And I think in previous years, and even like the last 10 years ago, SEO was more of a tactic based marketing channel where you were trying to pump a bunch of keywords into your article and trying to just basically game the system so that you would show up at the top. And Google's gotten really good at making sure that that's not a thing anymore. And it really is about providing the most value for what that customer is looking for. And the value that they're looking for could be something, totally different. It could be a blog article. That's a popular thing for SEO, is writing content. But it could be a video. It could be a product. It could be an app. It could be any number of different things. And so, or it could be an image or something like that, And so Google's gotten really good at that. And at the same time, they've gotten really good at noticing what's good content and what's just generic, not useful content. And I think that if you do spend the time to become a quality writer and to become a good communicator that actually can provide value for users, you will climb rankings, even in very competitive niches, because you're actually valuable. One of the core metrics of the value of an organic search result is if somebody goes to your search result and they don't go back to Google, they just continue forward, because that means you solved their problem, you answered their question, and they're not coming back to Google anymore. So obviously that result did the thing that they wanted it to do. If they come back to Google, that means there was something not quite right. There was something that they needed some more research on. And so that result didn't actually solve the problem. It didn't actually answer the question. And so Google, like I said, Google's gotten really good at that. And so I think there's a really good value in being able to deliver valuable content, or at least a valuable solution for people's problems. And you're right. I think it is a lot easier to start in a more niche spot, that, in the long tail is definitely, there's a lot of opportunity in the long tail for sure. So, like I said, I think I said at the beginning, I'm getting close to like 7,000 to 10,000 organic clicks a month, which is great. That's, 100,000 people a year. But the quality of those clicks, the specificity of those keywords is very intentional. And so I don't need millions of people visiting my website to be able to get more customers. I need hundreds of people to be able to get the right customers in the door, and they're looking for the exact solution to their problem that they're looking for. And so SEO is a great way to align with the interest of customers. That there's a lot of people that try to solve problems that nobody's looking for. And there's, if nobody's looking for it, nobody's going to try to seek out your solution to their problem. Like, it's not a problem. And so if you are looking at the search traffic on different keywords and things that people are actually searching for, you can kind of spy out like what problems people are having, and you can provide a direct solution to that inquiry. And whether, like I said, whether it's content, you're educating them on something, or it's an app that solves that problem entirely, or it's a video or something like that, that's the value that SEO can provide. And even Google, just recently, they're taking steps to eliminate some of the privacy concerns of users, and they're trying to make search a little bit more agnostic, where they're not, trying to cater things specifically to you, but they're making more of a general approach to that. And so, I think Google's gotten really good, and they've gotten to the point where they don't even need to know who you are. They know exactly what you need. And so, yeah, I think I'm pretty bullish on it. I mean, Google's massive, and there's other search engines too, but obviously Google's the number one. And I think even if Google wasn't in the equation, it still aligns you very well with what people are interested in buying, and in the problems that they have, for sure. So, and I think in social media, it's easy to get caught up in certain bubbles of how people behave and how they react to different things, and you can become disaligned with what's really valuable for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. Moving back to this whole idea of kind of transitioning from an employee to an entrepreneur, do you think that, like, let's say someone is like, wow, this is really fascinating. I'd love to be an entrepreneur. I'd love to, you know, run my own schedule, run my own business, etc. Is this something you think that is open to anyone who has that desire and motivation? Can they actually, you know, have reasonable shot at it? Or do you think it really is for a certain type of person who maybe, for example, has the background, or maybe there's like for example, when I'm listening to you, there's a lot of multidisciplinary fields going on here, you know? There's a technical kind of software field, there's a marketing field, a writing kind of field, kind of business strategy. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's all put together, you know? I mean, would you say to a person, wait a minute, before you do stuff, like get a broader kind of exposure to, you know, these different important pieces? Also, is it a personality thing too? I mean, like there's discipline involved, you know, long-term thinking, etc. Are certain people just more cut out, you think, to be more in the entrepreneur path, or do you think it's something that can be learned, you know? And what are the big things or the big steps to go in that path?
Yeah, I do think it is something that can be learned. I think anybody can do it. I do think it is more natural for some people. You know, it's more natural for somebody like me, you know, just having somewhat of a lazy personality, but also a personality of automation. Just that generally is very helpful for other people. And so like it's kind of easy for me to come up with ways to help people because I know exactly how I don't want to do things. Whereas, you know, somebody else that's a lot more high energy and just wants to get their hands on things, you know, maybe they don't have as good automation solutions for other people. But I think, you know, there's so many businesses out there. There's so many ways to make money. There's so many markets to serve. There's so many different ways to serve in those markets. Anybody can contribute to that market and be compensated pretty well for it. But yeah, you know, what you're alluding to is, you know, I do think there's a lot of skills involved. I do think that people need to first, they need to sit down and figure out how to learn. You know, there's a lot of people that go through school and even college, and they just still don't even really know how to sit down and read from a book or read instructions and you know, really learn something and practice something and get good at something. And I think that's a huge emphasis for me, is learning those skills, getting good enough to the point where, yeah, you're not like, you know, the best in the world at it, but you're dangerous enough to at least put something together that looks competent and can actually deliver results. And, you know, I think that there's a few different competencies that you can, you know, learn. And obviously, you know, for a product-based business, it's, you know, making the product, whether it's physical and you're dealing with manufacturing and you're, you know, iterating on the product and making it more, you know, better, or it's customer service and you're communicating with customers and you're figuring out pricing and things like that, or it's marketing and distribution and you're trying to figure out how to reach customers and where do they hang out and how do I get in front of them and how do I convince them that my product is valuable. And I think that alludes back to what I was saying earlier, where writing is really probably the most important thing, because if you can't communicate with manufacturers on how to make your product better, if you can't communicate with customers on why your thing is valuable and why they should pay you for it, and if you can't communicate with your team and get things done internally, then it's going to be really hard. So I think for me, writing is huge. I think it's super underrated for any kind of entrepreneur. And not only that, but it helps you think very clearly. But yeah, I think that spending time figuring out how to learn and then learning some skills allows you to at least realize what's valuable to other people, and you can deliver value to people. And then even from there, like you were saying earlier, like the code can be commoditized. I don't have to be the one writing code. And similar with any other business, anybody else can do the work, but to have a perspective of the work that it actually takes to build something, I think is very valuable, at least for the entrepreneur, the owner of the business.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you got some talked about some fun topics here across a variety of issues. Yeah, there's definitely, I think the field of business is open to everyone. You know, it's democratized in a sense where everyone has the internet, the whole world is coming together. There's technology is changing too. It's opening up new ways, you know, as you say, to save time, save money or make money, to help people with problems, to improve their lives, etc. So it's definitely going to be an interesting, you know, decade, or two moving forward with lots of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for the conversation, Jordon. I appreciate you doing a deep dive into kind of your story and your business and your thoughts on business. I definitely wish you the best. Where can people find you if they wanted to kind of, follow your journey and your thoughts?
Yeah, most of my stuff's on Twitter. It's at JDNOC. It's kind of short for Jordan O'Connor. And then my website's linked there too, jdnoc.com. And that's where I do most of my writing, just personal writing. Yeah, that's where I talk about most of my stuff.
Cool, man. Awesome. I'll go ahead and link all that in the video description below. And yeah, have a great week and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.